before we do that, I wanted to just read, I have just a couple of takeaway logs from last session that I thought were really well done, and I wanted to just read a couple of comments from those takeaway logs because I thought they made a good point. Annie Braithwaite, over there, I loved this, said, chatty kids equal kids who haven't been given enough academic chatting opportunities. If kids are chatty, take it personally. Add engagement strategies. Ow. I loved that, though. If kids are chatty, take it personally. Maybe you need more engagement. That was great. Will you just pass that back? Thanks. Tori Thompson. Tori, where are you? Not here? Okay, I'm not going to read. That one's Sarah. I just saw you sit down. Right there. Sarah said, I recognize that I'm not using engagement strategies to their full potential throughout the day. There are times during the day that I'm better than others. I'm excited to get a fresh start tomorrow. I liked that. I liked the openness of maybe I'm not doing this as well as I should, but I'm going to start again tomorrow. Thank you. Mimi, I saw you too. Where are you? There she is. Just a good analogy about engagement strategies. I'm excited to try this in my classroom. I think it's the piece in the puzzle I'm missing to keep my kids engaged. I loved that. I thought, wow, we could do a whole tips analogy where every week you get a new piece of the puzzle, and by the time you're done, it's glorious. Only not really, because you still have to do tips 2 next year, and it's our first time through, right? But I loved the idea that we're putting together pieces of the puzzle to make this picture of student achievement and student engagement. So thank you for those. Thanks for your logs every week. I'm always impressed by how thorough and thoughtful you teachers are in what you write. The second thing I want to talk about before we talk about partner strategies is that I was in a conference the week before last. I was in Indiana, and then this past week I was in another conference in Salt Lake, and I saw 2 different presenter styles. The first presenter kept saying, so who has a question after every slide? Tell me your questions. What are you thinking? Let's talk about this. And not surprisingly, we did not get through his content because we had so many questions and we went down so many different paths. And I was a little bit frustrated, and the people at my table were a little bit frustrated because we really wanted to access his expertise and his knowledge, and we didn't get to do that because of all the tangents people took us on. However, the second presenter that I'm thinking about was going so fast and covering so much content that there were no questions, and there were several times people had their hand up and he would look at them and just keep going. And it really created a feeling of shutdown, like why bother, he won't even acknowledge it. And I thought there has to be a happy medium, right? There's got to be the best of both worlds. So this is what I want to try tonight, knowing that it may fail miserably because I've never done it, but I want to try it. I put an index card at the top of your table. What I'm hoping we can do is if you have a question that's relevant to the discussion, to the content on the screen, absolutely feel free to raise your hand and ask that question or make that comment. But if not, if there's something you just in the back of your head keep wondering about, I'm thinking maybe write it on the index card, and when you guys go to do your takeaway logs, I will ask for these to be passed in, and then we won't just leave after takeaway logs are done. I will just go through these and read questions and give you my response. Can we try it? Will you give me a thumbs up even if you don't agree? Thanks, wow. What an agreeable group. Let's just try it. Thanks, Andrew. I want to give you a chance to ask your questions, but also not go down the path of no return. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, talking about partner strategies. The first thing I want you to think about just on your own is why would you want to have an effective partner talk system in place? Why would you want your kids to be able to talk to each other about the content you present? Will you take maybe 30, 60 seconds and just on your own, jot down your initial ideas? Thank you. Here's what I'd like you to do with your partner. Would you just share what each of you said, and then we're going to talk as a group about why would you do partner talk? Why would you want a system for that in place? And if you are the letter B, meaning you sit on the right, would you go first? Go. Thank you for coming back together. I think I'll just take 2 or 3 hands, If somebody's willing to share out, why did you and your partner say it would be important to have an effective partner talk system in place? What did you say? Yeah, Monty.
Natalie said that by talking with another student, they're able to get different perspectives. And then
Okay.
I said by talking about it themselves, they're able to develop their own perspective. So
Okay. So you hear a perspective from somebody else, but you also solidify your own perspective as you verbalize it.
There you go.
Love it. Another idea? Why would you want an effective partner talk system in place? Lynn?
In order to formulate your ideas sufficiently that you can explain them to someone else, it deepens your own understanding.
Yes. Raise your hand if, okay, let me say what he said and then have you raise your hand. He said, when you verbalize your own ideas, it solidifies them for yourself. You understand it better yourself. Raise your hand if as a teacher this year you've been like, oh, now I get it. Like now that I've explained this content, all of a sudden like the world has opened up. Yeah, sometimes it takes using language in order to understand it. Last one, Sarah.
Oh, I was just raising my hand that I agreed.
I agree, amen. Can I get a hallelujah? Anyone else? Yeah, last one.
Jenica, she mentioned that as a teacher, you all have your hand up, and, as the students all have their hands up, you don't have the time to listen to everybody. But as they have partner talk,
Okay.
everyone gets a chance to share with them, everyone what they're thinking, so they don't feel like all on again, and everybody gets a chance to talk and share.
Absolutely. So it's maybe we could even say the most time efficient strategy to give everybody a chance to share their ideas without calling on each student individually. Yeah, absolutely. Let's come through, if you'll fill in 2 more ideas. What does research show us about sharing partner talk? Of course, it increases engagement. Using partner talk is a strategy that truly allows everyone to do everything. Do you remember that from last time, our district motto? And I think we even had an action with it, didn't we? Remind me, what did we do? I know we did some, everyone does everything. Oh yeah, we were counting everything, like counting off on our fingers all the tasks. That's right. Okay, can we do everyone? Some of you are like, you remembered that? Can we start everyone and do it together? Ready? Everyone does everything. You got it. So that's the first thing, is that it will increase engagement. And then this one, I think is, I don't know if you're really going to appreciate how staggering this is. I got to listen to Russ Qualia while I was in Indiana, who does a lot of research about student voice, students having opportunity to speak out in the classroom. And this is what he said. He said, anytime you increase engagement and kids are genuinely connected to the content, they are 14 times more likely to learn. They're 14 times more likely to learn if they experience engagement with the content, if they connect with it. This, for me, answers the question I hear a lot of teachers pose when they say, I do not get it. I taught this lesson. We went over it and over it and over it. I must have said it 100 times. And then we took the test and it was like Greek, like they had never seen it before. Or then 2 days later I said, who remembers what we talked about? And nobody could tell me a single thing we talked about. I said it over and over and over again. What's their problem? Probably the problem is they never truly learned it in the first place, right? They didn't really make a connection in the first place with the content. Who said take it personally? Annie, was that you? Yeah, if you think you've taught a concept 100 times and they're still not getting it, I would say take it personally. They're not really engaged with the content. They're not really making connections, which Partner Talk helps address, luckily. Do you know what? Let's do this. Why should you have an effective Partner Talk system in place? Will you just read them with me? First reason, Partner Talk increases engagement and students, oh sorry, I didn't cue you, and students are 14 times more likely to learn. Thank you. Okay, so we want to talk about how you can structure Partner Talk to make it effective. We've only done one Partner Talk, so I know you haven't had too much time to do this, but what I would like you and your partner to do is just see how much you remember. So we've done partner talk this entire semester. What strategies have you noticed? What techniques have you noticed have to be in place in order to, I shouldn't say have to be in place, you don't have to do what I do, but what strategies can you put in place to structure partner talk? Can I have you and your partner in the blank space jot down as many notes as you remember about how partner talk should be structured? And this time, letter A's, will you share an idea first? And I just gave you a little hint right there, didn't I? Okay, let's take 2 minutes, go. Thank you. If I draw, actually let's not do this. Let's do something you should never do with kids. It's called blurt out. Can we do that? We just blurt out if you have a quick idea, a quick strategy. How do you structure partner talk? Just blurt it out. What do you do?
AB magnet.
Blurt slower. What?
I said AB magnet.
Okay. AB magnet, signaling who goes first. Okay.
Tell them explicitly what a table partner or an elbow partner is.
Okay.
Show them what that is.
Be sure they understand who their partner is. Is it the person across from them? Is it the person next to them, their elbow partner? Be sure they know who they're talking to.
They need to know if they're A or B.
Okay, who is the A, who is the B, especially in younger grades, right? They're not going to just figure out which one's A, which one's B. Bailey?
Just setting time limits, giving them a 30-second time limit, and then switching partners, switching voices.
Okay, letting them know you have this amount of time in which to talk. You're not sharing your whole life story. Okay?
Teach and model expectations.
Okay, teach and model expectations. So you show them what partner talk should look like. You don't just, or what it should not look like, what it should sound like. You don't just release them and say, talk to your partner. Oh, that went horribly.
Or like who goes first? Like who should start the conversation?
Okay, who starts the conversation? We know who's the A, who's the B, who goes first though in that partnership.
Let them know what the expected outcome is.
What's the expected outcome? Okay.
What are they trying to find out?
What are you supposed to talk about? I had a lot of presenters at the conference who would just say things like, just turn and talk to your partner about the material we've been discussing. What are your thoughts? And it was always this. Okay, better come up with something really insightful and really profound. Give them a really focused outcome. I want you to talk about how to cue for engagement strategies, right? Something like that. Annie?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Just that you rephrase the question, usually pretty concisely right before you let them go. Like, okay, here's what you're talking about.
Okay.
Go. Because sometimes I feel like you get lost in the instructions about what they're supposed to talk about, and then you say, okay, talk about it. And they're like,
And they're like, wait, what? Okay, so it's okay to maybe do an extended explanation of what they're supposed to discuss, but then right before they talk, you do a short rephrase to keep them on track. One more? Last one.
So we talked about teacher roaming the room, but I rephrased it to be teacher remains engaged also. So
Oh,
the
okay.
teacher doesn't disengage at the moment they engage the students.
Perfect. So when you say you talk to your partner, the teacher doesn't come over and quick check email, right? He or she should be wandering throughout the class. And actually, I have not modeled that very well because I feel like with adults it's a little bit condescending. But with kids, you better believe I'd be like, creepy eyes, like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? I'm going to listen. I'm going to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah, teacher stays engaged. Love it. Okay, here's what I want to do. I have 6 strategies I'm going to recommend to you. Hopefully some of them will be familiar to you and you will just feel validated, like, okay, I'm kind of on the right track. Hopefully too, you'll have some insights if it's not working or what you could do to improve or if you're not using it at all. These are some techniques to put in place with partner talk. So first one, letter A, is to assign students to be A and B, which a lot of you said. Or A, B, and C. You can fill this in if you want to. But you could do A, B, and C if you have an odd number of students. So in my class, and in a lot of classes I visited, I see pretty commonly that people have an A and a B, or sometimes it'll say a 1 and a 2, or a left and a right, or a pop, sickle, lemon, lime. I've seen a lot of different names. It doesn't matter what you call it, but the reason you call it something is so you can signal to the students who goes first. I'll start, you finish. The reason you put something is so you can signal to the students who goes first. You want them to know who's going to start the conversation. let me quick talk about a reason for that, and then I'll come back to ABC. So what I see happen a lot when teachers don't tell students who gets to go first is this. Hey, I get to go first. It's my turn. You went first last time. No, because remember? And they argue. They spend all their time arguing about who gets to go first. That's one scenario. Another scenario I see a lot if teachers don't tell students who goes first is this. So, and nobody talks. Then it's just silent because they don't know, neither of them takes the initiative to start. They don't know what they're supposed to say well enough that one of them takes the initiative to control the conversation. Or third scenario I commonly see is a student who will dominate the conversation. The same kid always goes first because he or she is just more comfortable being the leader. And then it cuts into the amount of partner talk time that the other person has. So really probably a good idea to assign an A and a B or a left and a right or a 1 and a 2 and to tell them who goes first so that you prevent my turn first, arguing, yeah, if I say my turn first, it means you'll go next. So you prevent arguing, silence, dominating. Thanks for indulging me. ABC, here's what I would recommend if you have an odd number of students, is that one of those students is a letter C. Here's what I didn't realize until like my 7th year teaching. If you're going to have a threesome, you probably need those 3 students to be fairly strong students. You don't want to I used to always just do these first 3 up here, were my A, B, and my C, because it was most convenient the way the desks were arranged. But guess what? These were my 3 most struggling students. So then what I did is I cut their talk time from 50% to 30%. And it was just harder all around. It's so much easier if you have 3 stronger students to be the A, B, and the C, to be the threesome. And then what I would do sometimes is if I had somebody that was absent, my C student was my floater. And they would float to somebody else's desk and partner with that person for the day. And of course, occasionally they'd have to go back to their seats to get their own materials. But it worked really well in a lot of cases to just know Cute Riley was my floater because she's a really strong student. She takes initiative, she's social. It's easy for her to move around the classroom and partner with anybody. So if you've got an odd number of students or if you've wondered about that, that's a quick tip and trick that I've found a lot of success with. And then of course, when you move it, it just goes. Do you know how it would go? A, B, C, A, B, C. Just keep starting back over every time you assign a new topic for partner talk, as opposed to A, B, C, B, A, B, C, B, because then guess who gets the most turns? B's, yeah. I saw a hand. Tara?
In the event that you have an even number and then somebody is absent, so now you have an odd number, but you don't have anyone necessarily trained in the C position. You know what I mean? Just put them together. You just quickly stick someone, put them in a threesome anyway.
Yeah, great question. So if you do have an even number, but somebody happens to be they happen to be absent, then do you just quickly put them in the ABC formation? I would, yeah. And I would just say, you guys won't look up here at A and B today. You'll just look down here at ABC. You wouldn't have to do that, but you could if your students are familiar with the ABC format. Yeah?
Is it confusing to have pairs and threesomes? Because I'm thinking about Elevate specifically. They have the kids work in triads quite frequently, but then they do think pair shares where they're partners. Is it too confusing to have both of those up? And if they're supposed to be in triads, you're in ABC. If they're supposed to be... Does that make sense?
So is it confusing to use pairs and triads together? I would say probably not. It probably takes a little bit of explanation, and you might have like a big red arrow or something where you signal, right now we're in pairs, right now we're in triads.
Yeah, okay.
But I think as long as you were clear about what each one looked like and which one they were doing, it would be okay, especially for 6th grade. Yeah, good question. Okay, so assign students to be an A and a B. I guess you can see it there or there. And then I would also suggest labeling 1 and 2 or something different left and right. lemon and lime at the rug. If you have a rug area in your classroom, I would recommend that you call that something different so they don't get confused about who their partner is. Devery Jepson, does anyone know Devery? 3rd grade teacher. Anyway, so that's her rug area, and she's labeled 1 and 2 for her kids to know who their partner is when they're at the rug, which implies that they have assigned seats at the rug too, and that she's carefully chosen partners at the rug too. Did you catch that? Okay. So how do you structure partner talk to make it effective? Can we just do an action and say assign an A and a B to show that each one is assigned? What do you do? Assign an A and a B. Thank you. Last tip at the bottom here. I would recommend that you don't tell partners when to switch. In other words, you give them a prompt. You say, I want you to tell your partner what your favorite animal is and why. Letter A is you go first. I'm going to watch the clock for 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. Okay, switch. Letter B is you should go now. I would not tell them when to switch within that pairing. I would only tell them when to go first. Any idea why? Why would you not want to tell them when to make the switch? Because here's what I see happen. I see what happens a lot of times is teachers will tell the kids when to switch, and some kids have already finished, so then they start talking about something else and they get really off topic. Or some kids weren't quite done yet, and the teacher says switch, and the other person just starts talking, and then they start arguing. So in some cases, you create too much conversational time, or you reduce conversational time if you tell them when to switch. So I would recommend just letting them know you'll each get a turn. I will only tell you who goes first, and you'll automatically switch. Okay, letter B. Are we on the next page? Is that right? Okay, thank you. Expect students to use a low voice. When I say low voice, what I mean by that is that only your partner can hear you. It doesn't have to be a whisper voice. I hate 6-inch whispers or 12-inch whispers. That is so abstract for kids to wrap their heads around. So I wouldn't call it any fancy type of whisper. It's just a voice that only your partner can hear. So it still is a talking voice, a speaking voice, but the whole room is not going to know what you're talking about. So it would look like this. If you were going to do it with a partner, it would look like this. Oh my gosh, Cassie, I love your handwriting. It's so nice and neat. Right? Now you could maybe hear me tell her that her handwriting was nice and neat because of the microphone, but it's not a conversational tone that you would use on the playground or in the lunchroom. So here's what I want you to do just to practice this tone. Letter B's, you're going to go first. And I'm just going to model moving this for you just so you see how I do it. I don't actually say B's go first down here, B's go first, and C's. I don't say anything about this row. I just move it because they're my stronger students, right? They can handle just watching it be moved. But what I'm going to ask you to do is practice what a low voice would sound like, just repeating what the low voice is. Just reading letter B and the parentheses underneath it. Practice using a low voice. Letter B's, you go first. Go. Guess what? Raise your hand if you thought that sounded lovely, and if you wish your kids sounded like that, right? Some of you are raising your hands like, should I confess? When I hear teachers say things like, oh, I would use partner talk, except the kids just can't handle it, they're just too loud, this is the component that's missing. They have to be taught how to talk in a low voice. Raise your hand if you've heard of the 4 L's in partner talk. In fact, there's a pretty popular poster that goes with the 4 L's. It's look, listen, lean, low voice. Okay, that's a really popular poster. Here's why I don't use it. And you can use it if you want to. It's not wrong, it's not bad, but here's why I don't use it. Because I have found that if you teach kids to use a low voice, if you teach them that the only person who should be able to hear them is their partner, guess what they naturally do? They naturally lean into each other. They naturally look at each other to read each other's lips. And they naturally listen a little more closely because of the low voice. So for me, It's kind of like, hey, if I have you use a low voice, the other 3 behaviors, look, lean, and listen, come for free. So you can use those 4 L's. That's totally fine. It's appropriate. But the most important one of those would be low voice. Can we do it? The most important one would be low voice. And you're going to be a happier teacher. Because who doesn't love calming voices? Raise your hand if you've seen this clip from Anchorman. Andrew's like, go Michael Scott. I YouTubed it, Brick, yeah. Anyway, everybody's in this meeting and they're all yelling and they're really loud and he wants to join in, but he doesn't know what the fight's about, so he just chimes in, I don't know what we're yelling about, and he punches the table. Sometimes that's how our classrooms sound with our partner talk if we don't teach them to use a low voice. We'll do one more and then I'm going to give you a chance to do some partner talk. Ready? Letter C, will you fill in, ask open-ended questions with multi-word answers. Let me, this might be an epic fail. We're going to try it anyway, okay? Let me tell you what I sometimes hear teachers do. I sometimes hear them ask yes or no questions like this. Students, do you remember yesterday that we talked about engagement? Whisper yes or no to your partner. Go. No. Do you remember yesterday we talked about engagement? Okay, I love it, I love it. You just did exactly what students do, only quieter. Because what a lot of times students do, if you ask a yes or no question, did we talk about engagement yesterday? Yes or no? Tell your partner. Students look at each other and the majority of them go, yes, because the answer is obvious, but some of them go like this, no, and they look around to see who heard them. Here's another thing I often see. Teachers will say something like, I'm just using engagement because that's what we did last time. Teachers will say something like, students, do you remember last time we talked about engagement? Turn to your partner and whisper the word engagement. Go. Engagement. And then they giggle. They do exactly what you just did because they feel stupid. They feel like that was way too easy, that was way too obvious. Why are we talking to each other about it? And guess what happens? Disruptive, silly, off-task behavior. So my suggestion would be that you don't ask really obvious or closed-ended questions when you're doing partner talk. A much better partner talk question, if we had been talking about engagement last time, would be something like, students, last time we met together, we talked about engagement. Will you say engagement 3 times? Engagement, engagement, engagement. You got it? Last time we talked about engagement, and we talked about some strategies you could use to cue your partner or to cue your students. Think back, what was a cue that we talked about you could use to get your class to respond? Will you tell your partner and let her A's go first and do something that's more open-ended that's going to require multi-word answers? Are you with me on that? Yeah. Not obvious, not easy. Stay away from that. I had a teacher, I'll just tell you a quick story before I tell you what you'll do with your partner. I had a teacher that I worked with in first grade just a few weeks ago. And she came up to me after I had been in her classroom and she goes, Sarah, this just clicked for me. I just got it. And I was like, what? What did you get? And she goes, you don't ask open-ended questions of the group. You don't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? What, like, give me an example. What are you talking about? And she goes, like earlier when I said, okay, we have 6 counters up here. How many more counters do we need before we have all 10, everyone? And she goes, that was an open-ended answer, and they all started shouting 4, but some shouted 3 and some shouted 2, and then they started arguing with each other. She goes, I should have just said, show me with your fingers how many more counters we need until we get 10. And then they could have all shown me quietly, 4, 3, 2, whatever it was. She goes, I realized though, I need to save my really open-ended questions that require deep conversation for partner talk. And I said, Gloria, yes, that's not really what I said, but she's exactly right. You save your open-ended deep discussions for partner talk, not for open-ended group comments, because otherwise that will take the structure of your classroom and collapse it really fast. Remember the domino video? Yeah, so we don't ask open-ended questions of the group. We do ask open-ended questions of partners. In fact, that's preferred. Can I say that again? We do ask open-ended questions of partners. That is preferred when we're talking partner strategies. So here's what I want you to do. Whoops. You have a place on your paper for practice, and what I'd like you to do just by yourself for a minute is turn each of these prompts, each of these question prompts, into a content-related partner question. So good partner questions might start with what, which, why, or how. I don't care which content area you pick. You might be thinking of something for science or something for vocabulary. Vocabulary is really easy, something for math. But would you take 1 or 2 minutes and turn each of those into a good partner talk question, something that's open-ended that will require a multi-word response? Go. Some of you are still writing, that's okay. Those of you that are starting to get finished, would you raise your hand and share with us just one of your questions? What would you use as an open prompt for partner talk? Tara?
We just did this for writing the other day. Which animal makes a better pet, a cat or a dog?
Ooh, which animal makes a better pet, cat or a dog, and why? Love it, especially the why component. So they don't just say, a dog. Love it. Kevin?
I was going to say, why is it important to follow safety rules?
Okay, why would it be important to follow safety rules? Why would you want to do that? Can you think of a couple reasons? Perfect. Other questions that you came up with? Yeah, Bailey.
For my class, when we do cursive, I give them a quote of the day and they copy the cursive down and we do like a little cursive lesson. And their favorite question, I'm like, no, our favorite question, what does the quote mean to you? And immediately they all turn, talk,
Okay.
and really like experiences, explaining themselves.
I love that. So they copy the quote of the day in cursive, so they're practicing their cursive, but then you follow it with, what does this quote mean to you?
And then we have a class discussion for just
Perfect.
5 minutes and we call it our life lesson of the day.
Life lesson of the day. How many of you want to steal that? That's totally fun. I love that. One more. Paige, you looked away when I looked at you. What do you have? Is it good? Nothing. I didn't write anything.
Do you want me to
Just pick
share?
one. Yep.
I said, why does the author state reasons for his opinion?
Why would the author state reasons for his opinion? Perfect. So a discussion in language arts. Love it. I hope it's okay if your questions aren't glorious. What I hope you're thinking through, though, is the idea that it should lead to multiple answers, multiple ideas, so that you can have a good class discussion about what the kids say. What I'm going to ask you to do now is look back through A, B, and C, any notes you took, and talk to your partner about ideas maybe you hadn't fully considered before. Maybe you had thought through each of these things, but is there an aha that you had or something that you feel is especially important in structuring partner talk? Which idea stood out to you? Letter A's, will you go first? So this is kind of a treat for me. If I draw your stick, will you tell us what did you say? Which idea had you maybe not fully considered before? Cassie?
Right here.
Right here.
Yeah, we just talked about asking more open-ended questions and kind of rephrasing them to deeper discussion.
Okay, so you ask an open-ended question, and then even once you get a response, you might rephrase a little more, go a little deeper with the idea. Love it. Okay, what did you say? An idea that stuck out to you? Andrew?
I talked about just telling partners to switch, because I've actually been doing that, and I hadn't considered the ill effects that go along with that. So that's definitely something I'm going to stop.
Okay. So he's going to stop telling students when to switch, when to let the other person go, but I might make a recommendation that when you do that, you say something to the students like, I've been telling you when to switch, but you know what I've noticed is that sometimes some of you finish early and sometimes some of you don't quite get done. And you might ask for their respect and say, I'm going to ask you from now on just to be respectful to give your partner time. I'll let you switch on your own terms, but would you just be sure that you also let your partner have their turn, even if you do get to go first? And usually if you phrase it as, will you show your partner that respect, and if you ask for their willingness, kids are really receptive to that. We should write a book called Teacher Confessions. Do you like how he said that? I've been telling them when to switch. Don't see Chris here tonight. We'll draw maybe one or two more. An idea that stuck out to you, Jessica?
One idea that I kind of thought about afterwards was like using this in math, because like today there was a problem in the book where it said, explain why this is subtraction, and they were like, well, do I have to use words? And so they wrote out 5 minus 2, like they wrote the numbers out, and so just like using that more to help them. So when they do have to write out the answers, then they already know how to do that. It's not like a new thing for them. I don't know if that
Okay, I love that. I hadn't actually thought of that, but this is a change I would make in my classroom were I to go back to my classroom tomorrow. We have math problems, and it's that horrible question, explain how you know this is subtraction. Explain how you know it requires regrouping. Instead of having them write that out, have them talk to each other about it and then share out so you can clarify some ideas. Love that. And then guess what they could do on the part where it said explain? They could write, we did. We talked to our partners, right? Okay. Last one, an idea that stuck out to you, Hayden?
I have some family like partners, but I haven't assigned an A or a G. I just been like, hey, talk to your partner about it, and like I finally got them to all talk, but I think that somebody's probably dominating the conversation, and some people are probably still not talking maybe.
Okay, so even though they are talking, maybe domination is happening, right?
Yeah.
So it would be easier to control just by switching back and forth. Perfect. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to go, yeah.
So really quick, something
Micah.
that I've been noticing even with myself, and I was explaining to my partner earlier, that when I use partner talk, it depends on the situation, especially with my low learners, and I'm focusing on them and whether or not they're engaging in the lesson, you know. And so when I don't see it happening is when I really jump to this technique, that those kids aren't engaged, or that they might be the ones that are playing with something in their hands or desks, you know. With this though, the one thing I don't use is the low voice. And I'll tell you, for me, it's almost like it brings that excitement back into it when the kids are, you know, they have a chance to talk. They're like, oh, okay, let's go, you know.
Okay.
So that's the only thing for me.
That's a good point though, and I'm glad you bring that up, because do you have to require that kids use low voices? No, absolutely not. That's something that I do because I was more comfortable with a quieter volume in the classroom, but you absolutely don't have to. If you feel like that brings an excitement and that lets the kids be more engaged and connected to the content, absolutely go for that. Good point. In fact, you'll see a video model here in a little bit, Mike Torrey in 6th grade, and his students are not talking quietly, and it works. So don't take any of these as absolutes. Take them as, these are some things that work for a lot of people. Take what works for you. Yeah, thank you. Letter D, have a we're done signal. Will you fill in? Have a we're done signal. In sign language, does anyone know the sign for all done? You just, yeah, you kind of shake your hands like you're done with it. So what I would say is have a we're done signal. Can we do it? Have a we're done signal. Because why? Why would you want to have students show you when they're all done talking to their partners? Why would you want them to signal that to you that they were done? Rachel?
So that you know if they're still on task talking about it, or if they had enough time and when to kind of reconvene.
Okay, so it's a cue to you as the teacher, right? Exactly. It cues you, when should we come back together as a group? When have they had enough time to discuss? When I was in my classroom, my all done signal was that students would just turn away from each other and face forward. They would face forward and their mouths were closed and their eyes were on me. And let me show you, if I can, what I did as soon as they did that. So pretend you're talking to your partner and you start to turn forward and your mouth is closed and your eyes are on me. I'm going to just show you then what I would do with the kids as they showed me they were finished. So turn and talk, blah, blah, blah. And then they're turning forward. Perfect. Done. Good job. Okay, so then I was doing silly little antics like that because it did a couple of things, I think. I think it fostered a student-teacher relationship. Like, it allowed me to make a personal connection with them as they finished, and it gave them a reason to want to keep looking at me and waiting for others in the group to finish, because I was doing silly things like, and I'm mouthing it, I'm not saying anything, but they're watching, and they keep watching until I bring everybody back as a group, because of those silly little antics that also allow you to connect with your students. I've never seen that in research, it's just something I did. With teachers, let me tell you what I wish I had done with you guys. Because I did say that at first. Will you just turn back forward, mouths closed, eyes on me, so I know you're done? But I feel like with this population, that's just not, it's stupid. Like, you feel stupid just to sit there and look at the teacher, and I'm not gonna do that to Stephanie. So what I wish I had done with this group, and what I think I will do in the future, is when you're done, I'll just ask you to quick raise your hand one time, and then you can keep talking to each other if you want. You can look at me, you can look at the screen, I don't care what you do. But I think in the future, I'll just ask for a quick hand raise and then down, so I can just get a visual for who's done. But that's why you do it. Let's fill in. So students, quit talking. You don't have to write this, but if you want to, these are two primary reasons you'd want students to have a Youre Done signal, so that they quit talking. They know they're not allowed just to keep going as soon as they're done talking about the content. And so the teacher knows when to move on. Okay, in this photo, I'm hoping this is a small enough group that you can quickly count. Can you count how many kids are done? Show me with your fingers when you know. And the answer is 7. Do you like how I held it up before you answered? Because these 3, let's see if this will work. 1, 2, 3, that's a group of 3 in A, B, C that are not done. They're still talking. In the back, you can tell those 2 are still engaged in conversation, and these 2. But by having that Youre Done cue, it quickly signals to the teacher which kiddos are ready to move on. Yeah, question?
So, a couple things. Unless you write their bio, you know that they're still talking on subject. And second of all, what do you do to, I mean, I know that you can, with your cute little antics and things like that, that they might stay engaged for 10 seconds, that, the ones that are done.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you keep that balance? Like, if you still have some that are really going on and on and on, how do you, if you're ready for them to be done and they're not ready to be done, do you know what I mean? How do you
Yes, you're very clairvoyant, because that's our next topic.
Oh, okay, great.
So as a lead-in to our next point, what do you do if not everyone's done? How do you keep them engaged for longer than 10 seconds with funny little antics if they've been done for a while? So let's talk right about that. Have a Youre Done signal. So the first one, a Youre Done signal, is displayed by the students. Students tell you when they're done. The Youre Done signal is given by the teacher to say, even if you don't think you're done, I'm telling you you're done, and we're coming back together as a group. There's 2 ways you can kind of gauge this. Let me show you a picture of why you'd want to do this first, okay? This cute little girl on the right, Allie, is my niece. And it would be really important for a kid like her to have a Youre Done signal, for the teacher to do something like, okay, time's up in 3, 2, 1, we're done. It would be really important for a child like her to have a signal like that, because she is incredibly talkative. This child started talking before she was even 1 year old, and by the time she got to be 2 years old, she was talking in complete sentences and paragraphs. And a lot of time when she talks, she gets going so fast and she has so much to say that she won't even take a breath. She will just breathe through the conversation and she will keep going, and then you'll have to follow her very closely to hear to understand what she's saying, because she just goes a million miles a minute, and she is incredibly vociferous. Really important for a kid like her to have a Youre Done signal, so that she does not drain the time of the entire class. So here's 2 tips, okay? You pick which one works for you, or maybe you use both, depending on the situation. I always watched for 80% completion. When 80% of my kids are done talking, that tells me, okay, it's about time to move on. I can bring the group back together and they've had at least enough time to get an idea of what's going on. Did I give you a place to write for you how many students that would be? Will you quickly figure that out? Or it might be easier to think, what's the 20%? So if you've got 25 kids, 2.5 kids would be 10%, so 5 kids would be 20%, 5 of your kids. If you've got 5 kids still talking, that's a good cue for you that you can move on. So will you quick figure out what would 80% be for you, or the 20% that don't have to be done? Who has it? Who has a number? Just tell me what you got. 28? Oh gosh. Everybody cry for Annie. Dear. Somebody else said 18? 20? Okay, the idea is when the majority of your kids are done, then you know you can move on. Or here's the next one, give students a time limit. So you tell them, you're going to have 30 seconds to talk about this. At the end of 30 seconds, I'm bringing you back together to put a little bit of pressure on the kids and to help them come back together when you want them back together. Okay, so here's the video I'm going to show you. It's Mike Torrey, 6th grade. I want you to notice, does he wait for 80% of his class to be done? Or does he use a time limit and just tell them when they're supposed to end? But he does have a "You're done" signal, so watch for that. And I'm sorry about this, but the sound is really bad. The reason I don't use a lot of other examples beyond myself is just because it's hard to get videographers into classroom and to get people mic'd. So the sound is bad. Let me just set the stage for you because you won't be able to hear very well. He is doing an Elevate lesson, and he's given them a little bit of independent time to look at these 2 pictures and compare what's the same about both pictures. So when the video starts, you'll see that they're working independently, and then he's going to tell them to share with their elbow partner what they saw. Okay, so watch for, does he use 80% completion or a time limit, and watch for his "You're done" cue.
So you don't gotta write complete sentences, you can just chop phrases. I see a star, right? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and finish up whatever you're writing. Now, what I'd like to do is, with your elbow partner, I want you to share the things you saw, and if they wrote something you didn't, I want you to add it to your list, okay? So you have 15 seconds to, well, let's go 30. Okay, take 30 seconds, share your list, and if they have something you didn't, add it to your list. Okay. Who wants to share? Let's just share out. Okay, hands up. One thing you see, Cole.
Oh, in both pictures, there's like a side thing, like the one guy's holding that, and there's one thing right there.
Yeah, so a sharp scythe, right? Okay. Does anybody know what we use this for? Do you know, Cole?
I think it's for like farming. It's for cutting hay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cutting hay.
Cutting
It's-
hay or corn stalks or wheat.
It's like the original lawnmower, right? So, there you go. Okay, good. Sydney.
Well, Avery, I didn't have this one, but Avery had that
In both pictures, they have kind of long hair.
Okay. So, longer hair, right? Okay. Nathan?
No clothes.
Okay, yeah, you'll notice that about a lot of Greek stuff. Clothing is different, right? Read.
Okay, so he then lets them share out, which I've cut just because you can't hear them very well. The one comment I did love from one of the little girls is she said, well, I didn't say this, but something Avery noticed is that they both had da-da-da-da-da, and she went through something her partner had said. So a pretty powerful discussion. Did you notice what his "Youre Done" signal was? Do it if you remember. In fact, I'll do it, and you... And then they went like this, right? So that they would quit fidgeting with anything and they would come back together as a group. I heard him do another one a minute later, and he went, and then they went. So he had a couple that he was rotating through, but most commonly he was going to bring them back together.
I had a question. So I noticed that his time limit was 30 seconds, but he did give them longer, I think, because I counted.
I think he gave him longer if my counting was correct.
And so I was wondering if he was actually waiting for 80% and gave them a time limit.
Oh, that would be very sneaky, wouldn't it? If I had to venture a guess, knowing Mike, I would say yes. Did he give them a time limit of 30 seconds, but then wait until he could see that most of them were finished? Yeah, he very artfully did that. But I think saying you have 30 seconds put a little bit of pressure on them to perform, didn't it? Yeah, and then he waited until he could see that most of them were done before he gave the signal. Good point, Natalie.
Didn't he say that, I noticed this, that as he gave the time limit and stuff, as he started watching the 80%, he says, okay, 10 more seconds.
Did he give a cue? 10 more seconds? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then he kind of watched and then gave the clap signal.
Okay, so I don't think this is in the notes anywhere, but it's a good point to make that it's often beneficial to tell students how much more time they have so that they know they're just wrapping up that last sentence and they don't feel quite so cut off and quite so interrupted when you do give the cue. So 10 more seconds before you give the "Youre Done" cue. Could be something, mine was 3, 2, 1, you're done. Here's what I don't recommend, and you can use it if it works for you, but what I would steer clear of, given my experience, is a verbal cue requiring a verbal response. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. 1, 2, eyes on you. You're likely not to get a lot of responding if you do that because, do you know? They're still talking. Yeah, they're likely not to respond to you, and then it diminishes your appearance of confidence as the teacher when they're not with you, when they don't respond with you. So if you don't mind, I'd like you to take a minute and jot down what's a "Youre Done" signal that you might use in your setting. I recommend claps or countdowns, but will you think of something that might work for you? Yeah, Jana.
I have a question. I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but what's the best way to choose the partners? Like 2 strong students or a very talkative and a very quiet? And how often should we switch partners?
Okay, great questions. How do you choose partners and how often do you switch partners? Here's my, boy, this is a huge topic, but it's a good question. So you don't want to ever put your highest student with your lowest student, ever. If you were to take your class list, let's just use the Dibbles list as an example because we all have Dibbles scores. If you were to take that list of 35 students on your Dibbles list, what you would want to do is go to the halfway mark, so say 17, and take that 17 and then this 17 and put them up next to so that you've got a higher student with a moderately skilled student. I'm not sure that's making sense. So my first answer would always be academic. You always look at them first academically, but you also have to consider behavior, don't you? Because you know that Hayden and Stephanie can't handle being together. You know that that's going to be a nightmare, even though according to the Dibble score, they're really nicely matched. So then I would say after you make those academic assignments, then you kind of switch them carefully after that. accounting for behavior. I don't switch my partners very often. Once I found a setting that worked, guess what? I was not one of those teachers that did like, okay, every month you get a new seat. It's the 1st of November, you're going to get a new seat. 1st of December, you're getting a new seat. No. No, that is way, way, way too much work for me as a teacher, especially when it takes so long to pair them appropriately. Are you going to die if I tell you this? Once I got them where I wanted them, I wouldn't switch them until like Christmas. And then maybe I switch them at Christmas and maybe again in March. And maybe at the end of the year, the last 2 weeks, they get to choose where they want to sit, or last week, something like that. But it takes a lot of time to pair them artfully. So I'm not a huge fan of like, we're going to switch every month, we're going to mix it up again.
What would you say for maybe a student that everyone kind of needs a break from?
Who do you pair that student with?
Yeah, because like I don't always want one person to have to work with those ones.
So I would say, okay, what do you do for that student who nobody should have to work with for an extended period of time? I would say start with your first mother hen and pair them together, and then go after a while, go to your next mother hen, and then your next, like I would do behavioral in that case, not academic pairing, but I would put them with the mother hen, and I would also have an honest conversation with the other partner. Guess what? The reason I'm going to have you work with Paige is because she just really, I wouldn't say she really struggles. I would say she needs somebody who can be a good example to her. She needs somebody who can help her follow directions. So I'm asking you to do this, hoping you can help me out, and kind of put the onus on them to be the leader and the example. Yeah, good question. And I've lost the clicker. Here it is. Okay, did you get your Youre Done cue? A lot of us. Okay, we're going to move on. Mandy.
I never, put the top student and the last student together, right?
Right.
So, which kind of students should put into the last one? Since, sometimes the last students can learn from good students. If you put, the similar level together, and each of them, they know nothing about the topic. What should they do?
So, let's see. I wish I had an example I would just show you. We've got student here is high, student here is high, student here is, let's say, moderately high, and another one here, moderately high, and one here is low, and a student here is low, right? So what you would do is take that list right here and shift it up so it breaks right here and comes up this way so that your moderately high student is paired with the high student. This worked out so that a low is paired with a high, but in a real class where you've got more variety, that it wouldn't happen quite like this. And then you've got a low with a moderately high. Okay, this was a bad example because I didn't have enough students. But that's the process, is that you take them and put them next to each other so that you don't have anybody really high with anybody really low. Because of all the research that shows kids who are too high, kids who are really advanced and are paired with struggling students experience a lot of frustration and shut down. So you want to pair them similar academic levels, but not exact.
Yeah, in the French immersion, they told us that we need to share the class in 1, 2, 3, and 1 can go with 2, but 1 cannot go with a 3.
Oh.
And 3 can go with a 2, but it cannot go with a 1. So 2
I like
and
that.
1, 2 and 3, but never 1 and 3. So we
I
are
like
grading
that.
levels in 1 to 3, and then we are organizing 1 and 2.
That's way better. That's way easier. Did you hear that? Assign kids a 1, 2, 3, maybe high, medium, low. 1s and 2s can be paired. 2s and 3s can be paired, but 1s and 3s cannot. Take a deep breath. That was easier. I love it. Thank you. I'm going to remember that in future classes. Great. Over here. Okay, let's blast through this last one because I do want to take time for other questions. Last part about structuring partner talk is that you always want to share out. What would the advantages be of sharing out, of having your kids, after they've talked in partners, then having something like sticks where you then draw a stick for kids to share out? Why would you want to do that? Some of you are raising your hands, but I'm going to ask you to talk to your partner. Letter B's, will you go first? I didn't give you a 10-second warning because I wanted to model using a countdown strategy, and you guys don't ever need it if I give you a warning. So there you go. I did draw up on the board just a quick sketch how you would want to pair students because that was such a lovely, simple explanation. But if I draw your stick, would you share with us why would you want kids to share out? Why would you want your students to share out after a partner talk? What would be the advantages of that? I keep drawing Chris's. Diane, not here. Chad, what'd you say? Why would you want your kids to share out after a partner talk?
I said accountability, because if they know, especially if there's a random system for picking out who's going to share out, like the stick system, then they know that they can be called on at any time, and so they need to be on task.
Okay, so it increases their accountability. Can we say it with him? It increases their accountability. Thank you. Why else would you want your kids to share out after a partner talk? Nicole? Not here. Marianne? There you are. Why do you want them to share out after a partner talk?
Well, actually, sorry, I was talking about, how we sit.
Oh, how you should pair them?
Yeah,
that's okay. If that's what you need to talk about, that's okay.
Sorry.
You're not in trouble. Monty, what'd you say? Why have kids share out?
So that they feel like we weren't just talking because you told us to talk. We were really doing something beneficial, or
Okay.
You know, there's a purpose to us talking, and now we're going to share that.
Okay, so it's not just to follow teacher direction, it's to also be able to share with your peers for some productive, purposeful reason. Love it. For sake of time, I'll just show you a couple ideas from the research. Oh, and I did put this up because I loved this. I saw a teacher who had done this for her stick system. I always just put mine in rubber bands, and then I just kind of, as I pull it out, I just wind the rubber band around again so I know who still needs a turn. But she had done this where she put the string down the middle of the container. I think I would have to label like this side, I'd have to paint that side red and that side green or something because I would lose track of which side I was on, but that worked for her and I liked it. Okay. One reason maybe because it allows peers to teach each other. One reason you would share out after a partner talk is so the peer says something that maybe another kid hadn't thought of. It gives multiple perspectives to the idea. Raise your hand if that's happened for you even in here. If somebody has said something that you've gone, oh, that's a good idea, right? Like just a few minutes ago. Also allows the teacher to assess student understanding. In the video you saw with Mike, when he had the students share out about what they had noticed was the same about the pictures. I'm going to go to that picture. Here's what they said in the first partner talk. We noticed that they both had hair. We noticed that they were both guys. I didn't notice this, but my partner noticed that one of them looks older than the other. Pretty superficial comments, right? That was a great way for him to assess that they weren't really getting at the points he wanted them to get at. So then he said for the next picture, he said, okay, I'm going to have you now compare the two images on the screen here. And what I want you to look at this time, not just things like their face and what gender they are, but would you also look at the background? And would you look at what they're wearing? Is there anything they're wearing that tells us who they might be? The conversation he had that time was a lot richer as the students noticed, oh yeah, maybe she's royalty because she's wearing a crown. And the baby has a halo, so maybe he's royalty too. She's in rich-looking cloth, maybe she's also a royal. So they started making deeper connections because he was able in the first picture to assess their level of understanding. Okay, so here's what I want you to do in 2 minutes. I'm hoping we can do this in 2 minutes. I'm only going to give you one, I'm going to call it one peek, meaning you can peek back at your notes one time, and your partner can give you one hint, meaning like you might be forgetting what the next one is, but they can give you a hint. See if you can remember what are the strategies for good partner talk. What are the techniques you'd want to use? So I will give you just 30 seconds on your own to look right now. Don't talk yet, but you do have 30 seconds to review. Will you just raise your hand for me when you're done so I know? Thank you. Oh, that works really well. Thank you. Okay. So this time with your partner, whoever goes first, you're going to list as many as you can think of. What are the components of good partner talk? Techniques you use in partner talk. Letter A's, will you go through the list first? Thank you. The reason I asked you to do that is, number one, because I think it's kind of funny to watch you all like laugh and when you realize you don't know the part you don't know, but also because I think it's really beneficial to recognize which part do I really not know, which part am I not really totally solid on. So here's what I want to do last. Ready? While you write your takeaway log, while you guys fill those out, can I have the note cards passed in, whether it's written on or not? Will you just pass them to the center so I can collect them? And then I'm going to ask that when your takeaway log is done, you don't get up and leave, that you stay for just a few minutes and I'll blast through any questions that were written on the cards. So we're passing those in, filling out takeaway logs. Thank you. How do teachers have energy to constantly be engaged in students' discussions when we're first-year teachers and need to reference our notes a lot? Great question. Anybody feel that way? How am I supposed to do all this? That's a really, really valid feeling. Like, I'm trying to learn the curriculum, I'm trying to get to know my students, I'm trying to meet the parents' needs as well, and do what my administrator wants me to do, and have some sort of personal life, and attend to my family, and my home, and church, and whatever else may be on your plate. It's a lot, isn't it? I get it, I've lived it. I think my short answer would be that you just start somewhere, that maybe you recognize, okay, it might not be realistic that I build partner talk into every subject throughout every day, but maybe I can start using partner talk with vocabulary. Maybe I can start using partner talk in science. Maybe I can start using whole group engagement strategies when I'm doing math. Today we're learning about regrouping. Say it with me, regrouping. Maybe you just start somewhere, and the more you do it, the more natural it will become to you. But give yourself a break too, because you have more on your plate than any other teacher, any other group of teachers. I'll tell you in a minute, if I have time, a funny story about a first-year teacher I ran into. Next question, how do you hit the reset button on a class in which you have failed to set certain expectations? Low voice, raising hand to talk, etc. How do you set the reset button? In 2 words, I would say it always starts with an honest conversation. It always starts with telling students, guys, guess what? I know that when I've had you talk in partners, sometimes it's been kind of noisy. Raise your hand if you've noticed that. Have you noticed it gets kind of loud? I've been thinking about that, and I feel like maybe it's not fair to our classroom when everybody talks like that, because it makes it hard for you to hear each other when the classroom is so noisy, and it's hard for me. So I'm going to ask that from now on we start using low voices with each other. Let me show you what that looks like. Remember tempo? So you go back to telling them the expectation, modeling, practicing, and really heavily reinforcing kids that are doing it. But I think it always starts with an honest conversation where you admit, guess what, guys? I've been doing something I'm not really comfortable with, and I think I'd like to change it. Will you help me with this? And enlist their support. What do you do if you have a super shy and quiet student who freezes if their name is picked from sticks? I'm going to give you 2 quick suggestions. One is to tell that student when they've talked to their partner and they've said something, to say something like, let me come to Lynn, my quiet, shy student. Lynn, guess what? That was perfect. Would it be okay if I drew your stick for you to share that? And ask them individually, would it be okay if I drew your stick? And if they say yes, then guess what you do? You pull the old, oh, I pulled Monty's stick. Lynn, what would you like to say? And let that student share. Or you could always do this too. If they say no, you could always come to the partner and say, Andrew, will you tell us what Lynn said? And allow the partner to share for them. Because I know they've talked to each other, right? Most kids are willing to talk in partners, but maybe allow the partner to share out. I'm worried about doing this with kindergartners. It seems like it might be a lot for them. It is. It's a lot for kindergartners. You might start with really, remember I said really open-ended multi-word questions. You might start with simpler questions and you might do it less frequently when you're dealing with kindergartners. Give them time to build up to having that skill to be able to use it more throughout the year.